Yeah.
How was the fall festival lining up? It looked like
It
it was
started
going to
off
work
well.
great.
Yeah, it's
You got a lot
working.
of people and
It's just for the kids because
Oh,
our
it is.
population can't afford to pay, so I do it all.
Is that him?
So I get people to help, and people have donated and did all this work, but the kids get their little tickets and.
oh, cool, man.
So,
Dunking booths and stuff.
No,
like that.
no, no.
It's a little bit cold for a dunking booth.
Yeah, but just like little games, like little games, just little things that they think is great. So
Oh, heck yeah.
we just think that to see their little smiles. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
great.
that's one of the things that makes it worth it.
Yep.
Yep.
That makes it.
Good.
Hey Carmen, how you doing? Busy. I'm running late. Good. How's school? Oh, that's nice. Oh, very nice.
Commissioner Cummings, you ready to get started? What do you think? Outstanding. All
We
right.
are
Well,
officially live streaming and recording.
thanks so much, folks. So welcome everybody to this workshop of the Executive Director Search Committee of the Children's Services Council of Leon County. It's a workshop, and what that means is that the purpose of the meeting today is for an interview. Because it's noticed as a workshop and not a meeting, we won't have public comment during the workshop. However, at the conclusion of the interview, at the conclusion of the workshop, we will immediately have a publicly noticed meeting of the search committee. So we're getting started a few minutes late. So sometime around 2:40, 2:50, we'll have that meeting, and then there will be an opportunity for public comment if anybody chooses to comment. Thank you so much for being with us, Ms. Green. Come on in, have a seat. I was just telling the folks who are here that this is noticed as a workshop. This is noticed purely as an interview, but we'll have a meeting after this, and there'll be public comment available at the meeting. And we have one interview today. We have budgeted about 70 minutes for our interview. Welcome, Ms. Green. You've been previously introduced to us, and we've spent time with you. So nice to see you again. The format for our interview is a 10-minute presentation from Ms. Green, and then we budgeted 50 minutes for the search committee members individually to ask you questions, and then for 10 minutes for you to ask us questions. And then we'll proceed. Let's see. And then we'll proceed into our meeting. And we've got Mr. Granger, Mr. Croteau here to help us stay on track with our timing. All right. Anything else before we proceed with the presentation? All right. So, Ms. Green, we're honored to be in your presence. The floor is yours.
Sure. This is on. Very good.
So I won't go through introducing myself. I think you guys know who I am, but it is my pleasure to be here today. I'm actually very honored to speak with you a little bit more, let you learn a little more about me, or maybe a lot more about me, and provide you with a brief presentation on what I believe your first, second, and third year focus should be as a council. So for year one, of course, completing the needs assessment and reviewing the information presented in it is key. You've already started that process, and that's going to be important as you finish into year one. I am aware that QQ Research is the chosen vendor for that needs assessment. And while they will be providing you with funding options A and funding options B by, I believe it's April and May, you still as a council will have to look at that and determine how you want to move forward with funding cycles. So with that and the way that they're doing that funding, those funding recommendations, an abbreviated application process will need to be developed, because wanting to get some funds out the door within the first year means that there has to be some sort of application process that is put in place. There will be lots of technical assistance that will need to happen because this is brand new. And so formulating that as well. And then begin looking at a comprehensive application process. I do have experience with CHSP and have seen that go from a paper process where all of the reviewers were given these huge binders and killed goodness only knows how many trees, to now an online process where everything is online, it's submitted, there's one portal, and it makes it so much more easy to manage. And then the last thing I think for year one is to contemplate what your annual reporting is going to look like. Per the finance section of the bylaws, annual report must commence no later than January 1 of next year, and the report needs to be issued by January 1 of 2023. Now, I realize, and having done lots of annual reports for several organizations, that normally that is more operational in nature. However, because it will be the first report of this council, I think it's important for the council itself to have some pretty good input into how you want that to look, the information that should be contained therein, as it sets the tone for you as a council with the community and the people who have invested in this council and voted for its approval. So as we get into year two, definitely want to finalize the complete grant process, and again, hold specific trainings and technical assistance for those organizations and persons who will be applying for that funding within the priorities that you have set. And that portal needs to allow them to submit their corporate status information, be able to validate that, apply for the funding, view the award status, submit quarterly and final program fiscal reports, and be able to compile data for the annual report. And that is important because we need to be able to analyze how those programs are working, and quite frankly, if it looks like they're not working, be able to discontinue funding those programs and move on into a space that gets the priorities met. Additionally, while the needs assessment does contemplate and require that there be information on the effects of COVID on children and families in this community, I, being in the human services arena, especially with children, believe that those effects are going to be far-reaching and long-lasting. So I think it will be important in year two for this council to look at what else can possibly be done to help children and families, particularly children, recover from the pandemic. Specifically, I think about mental health and mental health for children outside of the schools. Being a provider myself at CHS, we already know that even private counseling services are oversubscribed. And if we don't look at a way to manage that, we will end up with more incidences of children not knowing how to express their anger, not knowing how to express their frustration, frustration, not knowing how to handle social interaction, and ultimately that will be an impact on our law enforcement side. Next, I call this CSCLC in the community. I believe that this council should create a rotating meeting location schedule that takes the council meetings into each of the 12 zip codes in Leon County. There's no better way to know the constituents and know what they're feeling, know their experiences, than to meet them in the places where they reside. Not only should you make it a priority to hold meetings in every zip code, but those meetings should be held at a time that allows the majority of the constituents to attend. And I believe those meetings should be a little less formal so that there is no intimidation factor by the residents when they come and give you comments and their input. Locations can include school gymnasiums, community centers, youth centers, places of worship, family and child welfare organizations, and we want to make sure that we maximize public attendance and participation. This can also be an antecedent to the establishment of regular Leon County community conversations, or I like acronyms, so LC3s is what I would call those, to occur in the community to have a continuous input model developed to inform the work that the council does. Finally, in year 3, I think it's important to look at year 1 and year 2, see what has been achieved and not achieved, and determine whether that needs to move into year 3. But in addition, I think the council should engage in formal, comprehensive strategic planning, of course, including a SWOT analysis, to create what I like to call a strategic framework that is dynamic and builds off the needs assessment that was completed in year 1. In conjunction with the strategic planning, the council should consider procuring services of a design firm to create its official branding, logo, redesign website, and social media tags. When I look at the other CSCs across the state, they all have a branding that makes them very recognizable in their communities. And this CSC should also do the same. And lastly, I think it's important that in year 3, if not sooner, that the CSC should partner with established entities dedicated to serving Leon County's residents to commission a comprehensive needs assessment. So this would be partnering with UPHS, United Way of the Big Bend, CHSP, local chambers, and the universities. It can be used by each entity to laser focus on funding priorities and reduce duplicative efforts. So those would be the focus that I would propose for this council for years 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Very much. All right, so if that concludes your presentation, the council member can now take turns asking questions. And yes. The presentation having concluded, the council members will now take turns asking questions. We'll keep our questions brief, I know, and ask your answers to be as concise and direct as you can. Mr. Granger, Mr. Croteau, keep track of time for us and help us keep moving so that everybody gets to have their questions asked. Why don't we go right to left? Mr. O'Brien, would you like to start off with the questions?
Sure. There you go. You mentioned in year 3 or if not sooner, developing a comprehensive evaluation of needs in the community for children. I believe, how is that going to be different from the one that we've already initiated right now? Because that's supposed to be and we're required to do this by a CSC edict by the state. Mm-hmm. How's that different? Because that's going to be what we believe is going to drive the direction of our programming, et cetera. So why would we in the year 2 or 3 do another one? What would be the value of that?
So in the plan that I laid out, it would be in year 3. And again, it would be the beginning of looking at doing that in congruence or in partnership with the other agencies. There is a way to save money doing that because we are not, or the council is not bearing the entire cost of the needs assessment, and needs can change. You have needs that will show themselves to be true in year one, and you never know what is going to happen by year 3 or year 4 or year 5. So I think the most important message in that is that you can't do one needs assessment and expect that that's going to inform the work of the council, in my opinion, for many years to come, but rather for a period of time.
Okay. I hear you. When we develop programs, many of these programs are going to be not 1 or 2 year programs. These are programs
Correct.
that start and they're going to have to carry forward for a number of years before we see value. For example, early learning, or the early learning, the 0 to 3, 0 to 5 initiatives aren't going to really demonstrate outcomes really until you understand 3rd grade reading scores. I mean, that's kind of the big marker. If we continue to do evaluation after evaluation and change direction, how do we develop stability in programming to really push forward those things that we think, at least from the original, I'm just guessing at what one may be, from the original comprehensive plan, if we keep changing tone and direction, how do we know if we're even making a difference?
I don't know that it would cause you to change tone or direction, but maybe better define some additional needs that are out in the community. So I don't think it's so much about changing direction, but rather ensuring that this council is keeping up with the needs that are showing themselves to be prevalent in the community. So when I talk about the continuous model that could be developed when you go out in the community and have these conversations, who knew that a pandemic was going to come? And so we have to respond to that. So while maybe it's not year 3, maybe it's year 4 or year 5, I think that it would be pertinent to go back and re-up a needs assessment at an appointed period of time to ensure that the work that this commission is doing and the programs that this commission is funding are still in line with the needs there. And if in fact, there are programs that are moving right along and they are establishing the priorities and achieving the goals that are set, then it is time to change course and look at maybe some of the other priorities that make themselves known for this commission to then focus on.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. Principal Connor, questions?
My question for you is, in year 2, when we get to the point where we're finalizing this grant process, how do you see yourself being the person of the CSC in the community, and how do you draw those resources to us?
So when you say draw the resources, are you talking about, explain what you mean by resources, if you don't mind.
How, an example would be, let's say in our community, we have various needs, a need for student learning, early learning, as you just mentioned before. How do you see yourself being a part of this process when these grants are being written, when these folks are looking for this funding? How do you see yourself in the community to see these as?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I have prided myself on is being a native of this community and choosing to live in this community, build a career, have a family, be educated, and everything that I think makes you a great citizen of Leon County. And with that, especially with my experience in affordable housing, with the state, with private industry associations, getting into all of those pockets and making those connections with not only nonprofits, but for-profits, individuals, programs that are already running, and learning the needs for programs that need to be out there is what I do best. I am a consensus builder. My family often tells me that there is no one that I can meet that I can't find some common ground with. And I would use those skills to find that common ground, get into all of the communities, make those connections, and ensure that they are informed about the funding that this council will be offering and how they apply to get that funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. So we'll skip me. Commissioner Cummings, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you.
You got to push the button on next to the red dot. And you got to push it hard enough to where the light comes on and turns green right here. Technical assistance by Councilmember Mitchell. Nicely done.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Ms. Green, for being here. I've enjoyed your presentation so far.
Thank you.
And you obviously have a lot of experience in this area, working with nonprofits over the years. But my question is, based on your work in the area with nonprofits and various other groups, have you seen or have you recognized major gaps in services to our children, in your professional opinion?
So in my professional opinion, there are absolutely gaps in services for children in this community. While I think this council definitely identified some of those priority areas that the needs assessment will focus on, my work in affordable housing tells me that stable, affordable, decent housing for children in this community is a need. My work at CHS tells me that mental health services, in many cases, deep trauma services, are needed in this community. And you can just look at the number of children entering foster care. You can also look at the calls that we get at CHS where parents literally are at their wits' end and are ready to turn their children over because they don't have the tools that they need to give the children the mental health services that they need. And then of course, education is a gap. Every zip code in Leon County could have more services in the early learning space. And having parented 3 young children, I think about what we paid for childcare. And I often think about some of our families that are having to use alternatives or home daycare or just having a neighbor watch children when we know that that is a pivotal time for them to be learning what those children may be missing. So I think when you look at gaps, definitely affordable housing, mental health, as well as early learning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized. There you
I got
go.
it. Got it. Judge, just so we're just going to keep going around
That was basically
the
my
map.
plan.
Okay. Ms. Green, thank you very much for being with us again. I enjoyed your presentation the last time.
Thank you.
Took good notes. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And have enjoyed it today. There's one thing today that was not in my prepared questions that intrigues me, and that is the concept of moving from zip code to zip code for meetings. I so with you on that, and trying to set the meetings at times that can accommodate the people that we're looking to serve. What intrigued me, so I'm 1 vote out of 10, but that would be something that I would support. I think it's a great idea. I'm intrigued by, you said you'd like to make it more casual and make it a little more friendly for parents, which I too agree. And I sometimes think that if it's your first time at a public meeting, it's hard to put together your thoughts, especially something you feel as passionately as you would something that affects your children in a limited period of time. Tell me, what do you think is a good time period, a time limit to set on parents in this, as you called it, a casual setting?
And I know public comment can definitely be, it can be very time consuming. That being said, I think it's important for people to feel like they're heard. So 5 minutes, I think would be very good. If there is very good outreach and information that is distributed so that the community knows that the meeting will be coming, when it will be there in times, it gives them a chance to prepare to a certain extent and have their thoughts gathered and collected And I think that casual environment just brings that intimidation factor down, and they feel like they are talking with a friend about what their priorities are for their families.
I like your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell. So let me ask a question. All human beings have strengths and weaknesses, you know. And then looking at your resume, tremendous strengths in communication, tremendous strengths in community outreach. We're a startup organization. We were fortunate to have some interim staff jump in, really help us to get stood up. If we're trying to score a touchdown, we're on about the 15-yard line with about 85 yards to go. So tell us about your philosophy of hiring staff. Tell us about the weaknesses that you're going to have to compensate for, and how you're going to look for staff to help you with enhance your strengths, maximize your strengths, and help you develop areas of weaknesses that you might have.
So what I will say is, while I definitely see myself as a competent leader, a compassionate leader, and a very capable leader, I also believe that I should always surround myself with people who are smarter than me.
In my case, not hard.
I do not hold the top authority on every subject there is in this world, although my husband may say differently. That being said, I think that when you look at an organization that is starting up, you have people who I believe are builders, and you have people who have the ability to come into an organization that is already formed and make it better. I actually think I fall in between. So I think that I am a builder with the foresight and the vision to keenly hone in on each council member and figure out how to bring everyone's individual visions together to collectively bring the council up. I will tell you, so with that, I would surround myself and surround you all with a team that is smart in each of the areas that we need them to be. So I did get a chance to look at the budget. And so an executive assistant needs to be able to keep me straight and keep you as the chair straight, respectfully, and will be treated with respect, because everyone deserves that. A grants manager who is experienced in what grants means, what contract outcomes mean, what logic models mean, how they should look, so that we're evaluating our programs correctly. Is that my strong suit? No. Quite frankly, I don't like logic models. I always leave those up to the people who know how to do them.
And one of the comments that was made to me in the run-up to this meeting, we've all been called by people in the executive director search, I'm sure. One of the people said, well, you know, a lot of our candidates didn't have they come from the nonprofit side, the private side, this expertise in getting money and providing services, not the funder side. So can you talk a little bit about making the transition from an entity that receives grants to an entity that would be making grants?
Absolutely. And so I will pull on my experience with CHSP, because in that process, the city and the county, as you well know, basically entrusted citizens to help give out funding, to make those funding decisions. And so citizens are the ones that review the applications. They made sure that those CRTs were diverse, and you had accountants, and you had outreach people, you had PR people, you had programming people to be able to look at those applications. So from a funding side, I think I am more than qualified to be able to look at it from the funder side and ensure that anyone who's applying for funding is meeting those qualifications, and those who get the funding are giving the outcomes that we expect. And when they are not, being able to have that tough conversation to say, thank you, but this program isn't working. And unfortunately, it's not the best use of the money that was entrusted to the council.
Thanks so much. Mr. Bryant, question?
Okay. Let's stay focused on your experience with the Children's Home Society.
Mhm.
What I found in leadership is we can all quote our successes. We can explain them and vault them up there. But the reality is that sometimes our most important leadership characteristics come out during failure. No one bats 1,000 in leadership. No one should bat 1,000 in leadership. So give us an example of a failure or a hiccup that you have experienced at CHS and how you have addressed that, how you try to overcome that.
You only want one?
Give me a good one.
All right. So when I inherited the region at CHS, there were challenges, to say the least, and inherited a budget that was ending in a deficit and programs that may not have been performing the way they should. So the first 6-7 months, I got in there and kind of looked at everything and had to make some tough decisions. And one of those decisions was exiting the Open Doors program. So Open Doors was a program by Voices for Florida, and it helps children and young adults who are victims of human trafficking, whether that's labor trafficking or sexual trafficking. The funding model just was not working. Lots of challenges there with the funding model and what the money would support and not support. And additionally, the way the staffing pattern had to be, all of the team members were paid equally, which creates a bit of an issue when you're trying to hire a licensed clinician at $65,000 and a survivor mentor who probably does not have that same experience in education at $65,000. So after looking at the numbers, and this was a program we ran across not only Tallahassee, but into Panama City and into Jacksonville and Daytona, we were ending the year at almost a $77,000 deficit. And while the program was good, and we saw some, what I believe to be decent outcomes from an operational standpoint, it was draining the region. And so I had to make the tough decision to say, Big Bend will no longer operate this program. And there were about 3 other programs I had to make that decision on. One of them was SATP. I know you asked for one example, but I'll give you another one, the Sexual Abuse Treatment Program. For whatever reason, CHS in the Big Bend has not been able to run a good counseling program. It's been very hard to hire licensed clinicians. There's a lot of competition in this area. I just talked about it being oversubscribed. So had we known a pandemic was going to hit, maybe we could have held on a little longer. But so we had to exit that contract. The outcomes were not good. We only had 1 part-time therapist. And while for those children she helped, it was great. From a business standpoint, not so much. And from an outcome standpoint, not so much. So made the tough decision to exit that program as well. The outcome is that we have a much stronger region that has ended the last 2 years in the black. And I'm very proud of that. It's not an easy decision, but as a leader, sometimes we have to make the hard decisions. And I do see it a little bit as a failure because I know that those programs could have helped more children and that we weren't able to keep them going. But I know that ultimately it made the region stronger and will allow the region to grow in a way that makes sense, that is equitable for not only CHS, but also the funders that fund any future programs.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Principal Connor, a question.
There are different types of leadership. And when you think about your past experiences in leadership, there's a common thread that is your jam. That's our school's theme, is what's your jam? What is your jam and how do you see yourself using it for the CSC?
So I think my jam is empowering other people. I don't think that a leader is a leader unless you develop other leaders. And leadership can happen at all levels. The leader is not always the CEO. Sometimes the biggest leader is the executive assistant. And so I believe that it's about finding out what motivates and inspires people with whom you work and use that to help them do the best jobs that they can do and ultimately make the organization the best that it can be. I am also a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader in high school and I was a cheerleader in college. And I believe in giving roses while you're alive and you can smell them and see them. And so acknowledgement for me is a huge thing. And then lastly, I tell people, as long as you tell me what's going on, I will be there to have your back. The successes are yours, the failures are mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Cummings, you're recognized. It's on.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Green, just very briefly, I know you're familiar with the statute that created the Children's Services Council, and I know you're familiar with the provision that provides no supplementation.
Say that again. I couldn't hear it.
Okay, you're familiar with the provision in the statute that provides that the money cannot be used to supplant, in other words, other services that are being provided, no supplementation. Given those provisions, do you have any insight or have you thought about how the school system, Leon County School District, from an educational standpoint, can be used as far as meeting or closing some of the educational gaps that you have recognized, in your work experience?
Yes. So I know you all are aware of the community partnership school model that CHS does. And here in Leon County, it's at Sable Palm Elementary School. And there has been interest in having another community partnership school in this district. I will tell you that in my role, so I'm going to step out of the interview hat and I'm going to step into the CHS hat for a minute. So in my role as the executive director, we have been approached about doing another community partnership school here in Leon County. And it has been wonderful to have those conversations, but that is a significant process that requires some very specific agreements and some very specific partnerships. And as you look to do that, there are children who need services now. So one of the best ways to do that is to look at putting navigators starting in the Title I schools and then moving them to all schools, because the navigator is the position that can truly connect the children and the families to the services that are identified by the teachers, the faculty, and the staff, and in some cases, the school social worker. That navigator has the ability to go out and make every kind of connection, really no holes barred, and get those services in with that family, including making sure their health insurance is in place, their Medicaid is in place, food pantries, clothes closets. Pineview has the wash area where they can wash clothes. So that in itself, and so not to go so far as to say what should be funded, but if this council funded that type of innovative approach, starting in Title I schools and moving into all the schools, that is unduplicated and it is not happening already. And I know that it will make a huge difference in the children and families.
Commissioner, Mr. Mitchell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Judge. And I'm gonna, my next line of question, I want to go short answers. Mr. O'Brien and you in his first question exchanged comments on changing tone and changing direction, and sort of the danger of new organization, especially. And I've looked over your resume and I think to myself, 2 years ago, you took a job as the executive director of the Children's Home Society. And I assume that you created a 3-year, maybe a 5-year plan for them. There's danger in changing tone and changing direction. Again, as I just want to reflect on your resume, one vote, it's important to me that whoever is the executive director dedicate themselves to this job. Life happens. I'm not saying, no, you got to swear to it, but talk about one, the position you're leading the Children's Home Society in, that changing tone and that changing direction, and how that and your experience over the last several years of moving in and out of jobs, how you're going to bring that to the Children's Services Council.
So I have, what I believe, been very deliberate about my career moves since I started working in 1991. And I have a 30-year track record here in Leon County. And as you can see with my resume, I started in communications and public relations. And I had always been of the opinion that you put in and work as hard as you can. And if there's an opportunity that feels right, that looks right, that is meaningful to you or to me, then I would go for that. When I joined Children's Home Society, I knew that that would be where I would be. I'm 54 years old, and I figured that's where I would retire from Children's Home Society. I had found it. And if for some reason this committee decides that I'm not the person for this job, I will be very happy at Children's Home Society because the work I do there is hard work, and I know that it makes a difference. But the thing about this job that attracted me, Mr. Mitchell, is that it is specifically benefiting my county, not diluted across 8 counties or 14 counties or down into Gainesville. I can use my skills, my knowledge in affordable housing, my knowledge with DCF, my knowledge with economic development, my knowledge of the political framework in this city to directly benefit the children in this county. And so if I'm afforded the opportunity to lead you, I am going to lead with passion, with commitment, understanding that this is not a pit stop, but rather a final stop for me.
Okay, so your job with Florida Housing Finance Corporation, that was one that you had for 10 years. Can you tell me the conditions under which you left that job?
Sure. So I was hired by Steve Auger, who was the executive director there, I think starting in 2002. I was hired there in 2007. For 10 years, I was communications director. I did very well, have excellent evaluations that can be gotten via public records requests. And in 2016, there was, and I'll just be frank with you, there were some articles that were written by a reporter out of South Florida regarding a lender dinner that Florida Housing held to congratulate and thank our lenders for originating loans that allowed the organization to make money to be able to fund projects. There was no public funds. There were no public funds in any of that. However, as sometimes can happen, that message was totally misconstrued. So the executive director was asked to resign. We got a new executive director, and I worked with him for about 6 months, and he decided he wanted to go in a different direction, as any leadership can do. But I did not leave there under a cloak of darkness. I did not leave there having done anything illegal, immoral, or unethical.
I wasn't suggesting.
No. I'm just putting it on the record. While I worked there, I worked with passion and zeal and accomplished a lot.
Thank
Thanks so much. So we've been talking at a very high level of policy and leadership and philosophy. Let's bring it down to the level of the nitty gritty that we seem like we're dealing with on a day-to-day and hour-to-hour basis. Public meetings, open meetings, public records, board relationship. You said lead us. We expect maybe we'll be doing a little bit of leading you.
Yes.
But talk it, because I like Mr. Mitchell said, I like the idea of going into the communities. I like the idea of going in a little less formal and having that good communication. But one thing that I think we've all experienced is hard because of the open meetings law, is hard because of some of the things that we got to do as far as making a record, keeping a record, all of the mundane things that you got to do to run a what is effectively a specific purpose local government, you know? Tell us about your experience with open meetings, public records, and running an organization subject to those constraints.
Yes, so I have lots of experience dealing with public records and public meetings. So working at DCF, of course, it's a state agency. I was there for 2.5 years in the communications office. We handled public records requests, and we also managed any public meetings that the secretary at the time had, or really any of the staff. Probably where I got the most experience would be Florida Housing Finance Corporation, because while a lot of people only see it as a housing finance agency, it is an instrumentality of the state and subject to public meeting laws as well as public record laws. So all of those meetings are open, they're public, there has to be public comment and official record, everything that applies to this council. So that does not cause me any pause. One thing I pride myself on being is very organized and understanding how all the I's need to be dotted and the T's need to be crossed so that this council will not end up in a situation where they are in violation of any of the public meeting laws, public records laws, minutes that need to be posted, kept, and things of that nature.
And let me follow up too on the comment you made about leading us. Talk about how you see the role of the board versus the role of the executive director.
So I see the role of the executive director as being operational, ensuring that each of the council members have what they need to be able to make the decisions that you make. So whether it's meeting packets, whether it's information, whether it's conversation, that would be the role of administration. I see the role of you all as council members to unfortunately read through all of the information that you get, possibly have those conversations with your constituents, think about what collectively as a council you want to accomplish, and then be able to make those decisions. So to a certain extent, I see administration as being your executive assistants, giving you what you need to be able to make the decisions as a council.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you. You know, the good folks of Leon County voted to give their hard-earned dollars for the benefit of investing in children. That's why we were created. $9 million sounds like a lot of money, but at the same time, I can guarantee you, as valuable as those tax dollars are, and we should respect the value of those tax dollars, we were stewards of those tax dollars. The one thing that I think all of us around this table would agree upon is that $9 million barely scratches the surface of the unmet needs of our children. So recognizing that, have you thought about how to help us leverage those $9 million, how to best use them, leverage them, et cetera?
Yes, and so again, I'll go back to my experience with CHSP. So CHSP, of course, never had an infinite amount of money to be able to provide to those programs that applied. And so when looking at the applications and the outcomes and even putting on those organizations some caps on what they ask us to fund, that becomes very, very important. I think looking at human services in particular and services to children, you're talking about huge investments in people, because many of those services are provided by people. So it's not necessarily curriculum or supplies all the time, but rather the people that are hired to do that. So I think that once it is determined exactly how much will be divvied out or will be provided in the funding, you have to look at the application process to determine what kinds and amounts of funding will go to which types of agencies. I do not expect that any of the funding, well, I won't say that. I was going to say that. I'm going to take that back. I think that it's going to be difficult to wholly fund a program. Let me say it that way. And so there may be some smaller programs that this council can wholly fund, but I also think that it's prudent on any of the organizations that apply to look at the diversified way that they fund their particular activities. So I really think it's just about looking at the organizations that are coming, looking at the funding priorities, and maybe even determining we'll put this much in housing, this much in education, this much in early childhood or mental health. And so I think that providing you the information, if whatever information you need to try to make that decision, also providing figures, knowing how much a mental health appointment costs, what that means, and how many mental health activities can be funded feeds into that.
Thank you so much. Principal?
Got it.
Well,
All right, you spoke in year 2 about your vision of COVID recovery. And being an educator and knowing the past 18 months has been very difficult. A lot of things have happened or have not happened. Outside of mental health, what else do you see coming from that?
You know, I think it's important for our children to understand how to socialize. For almost 2 years, they have not been able to see each other, touch each other, learn how to agreeably disagree. And so I think understanding that socialization plays a part in a whole child experience. So when you look at housing and education and mental health, you can't not also think about some of those, I'll call them extracurricular activities that help children build those social skills. Things like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and Girls on the Run and things of that nature. So I think that while we look at the gaps for sure and look at those priorities, there may even be opportunities to look at those social types of programs that will help our children build those social skills that they miss. I particularly think about our 5-year-olds who missed a whole year of kindergarten, almost, year and a half. So they never got to, go through the Johnny hit me. And so you don't hit Johnny back. They didn't get any of that. And the only way to do that is to create spaces that allow them to build those social skills. So I think that would be really, really important.
Oh, thank you.
thank you so much. Commissioner?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Green, you express your sentiment about this particular job being special to you because you would be specifically helping the children and helping to elevate Leon County, children in Leon County. And you indicated you are a native of Leon County, so that's special as well. So being from Leon County, you're familiar with the cultural aspects, the racial aspects, divisions are not in Leon County. How do you feel, or do you feel that's a positive for you if you're chosen as executive director of the Children's Services Council, having specific knowledge, having lived here, known the various zip codes, nooks and crannies, what have you? Will that be an asset for you as an executive director? And will that be a positive for the council with you at the helm of the Children's Services Council?
So I absolutely believe that that would be a positive. I, of course, listened in on the last committee meeting, and I heard several people get up and talk about how I was raised on the south side of town where my mother still resides. I currently live on the north side of town, not very far from Mr. Mitchell, I don't think. And I have children who started their education on the north side of town. And we then move them to the south side of town to be educated. And if I might be candid, one of the reasons we had to do that is because on the north side of town, they weren't seen. You know, as Black children, they weren't necessarily seen. And so we moved them to FAMU DRS. So what am I saying? I'm saying that irrespective of a child's race, their culture, where they were raised, the zip code they reside in, whether their parents have money or don't have money, every child should be seen and should have the opportunity to achieve their greatness. And quite frankly, I believe that I was raised in a county that allowed me to do that, allowed me to be seen and to achieve my greatness. But I think it was because my mom was very deliberate about the things that she put us in. We happened to go to an all-Black school, but we went to an integrated, if not mostly white, dance school. We had Miss Whitaker was our music teacher, and she lived in Waverly Hills. So we traversed the entire county with all of the activities in which we were involved. And I just love going in stores now and seeing people from my childhood and being able to talk with them and meet with them. So would it be an advantage to have a Leon County native in this position? Absolutely, because there's not an area of town here that intimidates me, that makes me feel like I can't go into, that I don't feel like I have something to relate to the children and families that are there. So absolutely, I think it would be a benefit.
Thank you. Thank
Mr.
you.
Mitchell.
Well, I understand this is our last question, so I'm torn because.
We're getting there.
Yeah, I still had a couple more, so.
Paul, we can take the time that we need.
Okay. Foster care system, so your current role. I'm interested in knowing kind of your beliefs. You've now worked in it 2 years. What do you think are the most significant weaknesses in the system? And if you were, queen for the day and had a magic wand and could fix it, how would you fix it?
So I do want to start by saying I actually have a few more years because I worked at the Department of Children and Families. So was there for about 2.5 years and intricately involved in a lot of things that dealt with the foster care system. Let me start by saying foster care is not the ideal place for a child to be raised. It is really meant to be a temporary placement until that child can be reunited with the family. And so one of the biggest problems with the foster care system is there are not enough services to put into families' homes so that they can get what they need to properly parent children. What we know is that most children, about 75% of children who are removed from their home are removed for neglect, not physical or sexual abuse. So neglect means substance abuse, loss of job, mental health issues, domestic violence, just not knowing how to parent. And so if we can get services in to address those things, then we don't have to have as many children who are removed from their home, and our foster care system becomes a place where only those egregious physical and sexual abuse cases result in the child being removed from the home. So if I had a magic wand, what would I want? I would want there to be enough services so that when a CPI goes into a home because of a call, they can quickly identify, oh, this is a domestic violence issue. So we have someone we can call and connect this family with so that they can get the help they need for domestic violence, and then be able to monitor that family so that you're not pulling kids out of the home. Oh, this is a substance abuse issue. So we have inpatient and outpatient treatments that are diversified and innovative, because everything doesn't work for everyone, so that this child can be put back into that home within the 12 months that the state says that they're supposed to be. That would be my wish. If I had a magic wand, that would be what I would want.
Okay, so let me kind of follow up on that, and this might help me answer a second question. Dealing with adverse childhood experiences, and certainly all of the list of troubling experiences that in your magic wand would go away. And I, by the way, I did the same thing with my magic wand. But let's accept the fact that we don't have the resources. We don't have all the money that's needed. So help me understand from sort of a toxic environment that a child is coming from and dealing with those adverse experiences. What role can the Children's Services Council play in dealing with those children? And by the way, that goes for every zip code in this county. It really is not based on the wealth of the family. Those experiences go across every socioeconomic category. So I'm curious what you think the CSC's role could be in addressing that.
Yes, absolutely. Because children in foster care in Leon County do come from every zip code, for sure. So I think that it's about prioritizing what could maybe have, I don't necessarily want to say the greatest impact, but an impact that can be supported by the council. And I will tell you, the biggest service that is lacking across the state and in Leon County is domestic violence assistance. And so when you look at it, you think, but that's not a service to children, but actually it is. Because if you are able to address and help mitigate the domestic violence that goes on in a home, then that positively reflects on the child. We know that children who come from abused homes, more than likely, the studies have shown, become abusers themselves, can become problems in school, can have mental issues, all of those things. So if there is a way to address that issue, then, and knowing that there are no services here, not as many as you need to be able to address that, then you will positively impact children on the other side.
All right. So, Ms. Green, thank you so much for answering our questions. Thank you so much for putting yourself through this process. Now is the hard part. Now's the time for you to ask us questions. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask of the committee members? Hard for us, maybe not so hard.
I don't know that I have any questions. I think that most of my questions were more operational in nature, and I was able to get those answers from Ted and Holly. I have watched this council form and storm and end up in a place where you're now looking for a permanent leader. I would love to know what you all see as your challenges. What do any of you see as your challenges or as the biggest thing that the council would need to overcome?
So for me, it's been day to day. For me, it's been standing the council up, which is why I ask you those questions about the specifics. And now the big challenge for us is to make the pivot that really we've been describing today, which is to the finally how do we decide how to get money on the street? How do we decide what our priorities are going to be? I think all of us are convinced that the needs assessment is going to identify way more needs and way more gaps than we are going to have resources to solve. And so we are now going to be faced with the hard choice, the hard choice of what are our priorities. I was in response to Mr. Mitchell's questions, I was very happy to hear that I was, as the dependency judge for all those years, I was a little worried that I was going to find out that it was all my fault. So I appreciate you not mentioning that. But no, I think our big challenge now is pivoting from standing up an organization to really the hard policy choices of what our priorities are. What do you guys think, Carolyn? What do you think?
Thank you, Judge Thurston. I totally agree with you. And I think we all recognize as council members that the taxpayers, including ourselves, voted overwhelmingly for the establishment of this council because we wanted to address the deficiencies that our children are facing here in Leon County. And so we've been very deliberate in choosing an agency to do the gap analysis, which we've already signed that contract. And we've been also very deliberate in choosing an individual to be our leader, executive director of the Children's Services Council. So I believe we started out with a major task, but under the leadership of Judge Surstrom as our executive director, we've come this far. It's been a lot of hard work, but I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you so much. Treasurer Mitchell, what are our challenges? I bet there's a list.
We probably don't have that much time, sir, but here's what I'll tell you. I think the challenges are, and this is based on sort of feedback that we got. We've gotten from all of the meetings. The last meeting where we allowed people to go past 3 minutes. There's a reason I keep mentioning that, sort of a sticking point for me. But nonetheless, I think our biggest challenge is making sure that every aspect, every part of Leon County feels like this Children's Services Council is there to serve. And the language actually is not exclusive to children. It is to the family. So it is both to children and family. It is not for any one particular part of this community. It is not for one particular need. It is very, very prescriptive in the language that we as voters voted for. And I was a strong advocate for. In our first meeting, I mentioned that there were, about 35% of the people who didn't vote for this. 35% of the people did not vote for it because they don't like children and they don't want improvements in this county. 35% of the people in this county didn't believe that government has done a good enough job with the money that they currently are spending to afford them $10 million more over a 10-year period. It's $100 million. That's why they voted against it. Our biggest challenge is to find those 35% and accept the fact that you always have fringes. So we're not going to win them all over. But I am hell-bent and determined to make sure that they understand that at least one member of this council, for as long as I stay on it, intends to do what I think is best and right for the council and the community it's supposed to be serving, which is Leon County.
Thank you so much. Mr. O'Brien?
I agree with everything that the three of you have said. I think that the prioritization piece is going to be the hardest part of this job, and it's going to be policy driven. The reason why I think it's going to be the hardest piece of it is because it's going to be heartbreaking knowing that we're going to leave certain children behind. We cannot address all the needs. The question is, where can we have the biggest impact and have the longest value? How can we really change lives, give the kids a fighting chance to be successful? But again, going back to $9, $10 million, it's not enough. That's why I asked the question of you of how you would do that. I do think there's an opportunity to leverage that. I think we can leverage the dollars and the impact and the influence we have to bring more resources on board, because The more we can bring, the more we can do. But I do think that there's going to be this issue of knowing that decisions we make are going to leave certain children without when they have real needs. The other thing is, and it really comes back as a kind of a question to you. One of the roles that we have is we are doing this as a council. This is not our full-time job. We're going to be depending largely upon on the operational side, leadership to drive that forward. Every leader has blind spots. I don't care who they are. I don't care if you're Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton or anybody else, you have blind spots. The question I have is, what are your blind spots and how can we help you address those blind spots? Because that's our job too, to make whoever is in this role successful. So for us to do that, we need to know what some of those are. What can we do to provide additional resources, support, make sure that we don't allow, that fastball to the side of the head to come, racing across.
You can answer if you'd like.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know. To be very frank, I don't know that I would know the blind spots until I got in.
Until the ball hit you.
Or at least until the ball is on its way. One thing I am is very communicative, and to know that a council stands behind me to ensure that I don't fail, and I stand behind you to ensure you don't fail. To me, that's half the battle. And so with candid, honest conversations, and I just believe in hitting something head on when it starts. I keep my cool. I'm very cool-headed, and I like to think before I act. So as the young kids say, I'm here for it. And so whatever comes, I feel like as a council and as a team, we'll figure out how to address that.
Thank you so much. Principal, bring us home.
Right. Well, one of the reasons that I voted for this and why I submitted an application to be a part of the council was for a very selfish reason. And it's for the children and families that I serve in my community. I'm a principal of a Title I school. And although I may hold the title of president, I feel like that principal, I'm a counselor. I'm a provider for some. I carry these multiple hats. Yet 40 to 50% of the students that attend my school come to kindergarten and they've never gone to school. That sets up a lot of barriers for me as a principal, for the teachers that serve our students, but it's not just my school, there are other schools. But when I think about my students and when I think about their beginnings, that's the challenge that I see, is how do we change the trajectory of the children in the communities that we serve so that they can be the best that they can be. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what our biggest challenge is. Every day I go to work and I want to make a difference, and we do make a difference, but there's a piece that I can't touch because of the boundaries that I have. And that's what I was seeking for this council to be a part of. Whatever slice of the pie that schools and children that we serve, whatever we can get, we'll take it. $9 million sounds like a lot in my world. That's like a gajillion dollars. But my hope is that whatever piece that our students and families can get is going to make a difference. And that was, again, my sole purpose for being a part of this in both ways, as a voter and as a council member.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. So I think that brings us to the conclusion of this meeting. Oh, Mr. Mitchell, go
Can I
ahead.
just ask one quick question?
Absolutely.
I meant to, Ms. Green, on your resume, you show that you are currently the CEO of Treby Road Strategy Group. Is that, so, I mean, I assume that that's some sort of a consulting firm?
Yeah,
or-
and so it started when I was looking to get into executive management. It will close down
Okay,
if
so-
I am afforded this opportunity.
Right, one job only.
Absolutely.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Absolutely.
Outstanding. Well, thanks so much. So I think we'll take just a brief bathroom break, 5 or 10 minutes. So we'll plan to come back at 5 minutes after 3 and start our meeting. Thanks for your patience, everybody who's